Good morning. Hmm. And so just a quick reminder that practitioners do treatment for you. And whether you're online, you can contact our website and submit prayers. And there's also a phone number. If you call, you can hear a weekly prayer. So just taking a breath where you are. And so I acknowledge life, the one life, and that divine mind and source from which all is formed, all is created. And I understand that the nature of this one, that it is an unformed power, an unformed consciousness, bringing all things into creation through its thought and idea. It knows only love and good. And because this is its nature and it is all there is, that it is within me and it is my nature. It is the nature of all people, all things, all containing and expressing that power and that love, supported in life, for it is the one life living through all. And I know that because thought creates from that divine mind as well as creating through my mind, for that dynamic, responsive substance flows to me and for me, bringing all that I need into being. That there are times that I may be in an expectant joy of my good arriving, or I may be experiencing loss or despair. And knowing that is all flowing from that divine mind through me, that there is purpose and guidance, for I am becoming more, and more of it is pouring into me to reveal my good in its greatest measure. And for this I give great thanks. For it is all being done, all happening in a purposeful and divine way. And I give great thanks knowing that this is occurring for all experiencing that good, revealing itself. And so I greet that perfection and that good with a glad heart. And I release this into that divine mind, knowing it is already happening and being done. And together we claim that as we say, and so it is. And we'll have 2 minutes of reflective silence until our music begins.
This whole year we're looking at the idea of living out loud, living our lives fully. And I always like to remind us that doesn't mean we have to be loud and in your face, but living fully. That's what we mean by out loud. And this month we're doing embracing self-care. And so today we're going to talk about balancing grief and joy. Balancing grief and joy. And I asked for that song. I asked them to play that song because it points toward a fantasy that many people have, that life should be an unending flow of happy, happy moments, never ending. That our fantasy of heaven is a place where nothing ever happens. Where everything is perfect and never changes. And it's funny because they have that song on, several people have posted it up onto YouTube, and you get these comments going, this is exactly how I imagined heaven to be. And this is what I really long for. And it's just like, are you kidding me? Nothing ever changes. I had to kind of chuckle because in that reading that I was doing this morning, and I'm not sure whether Ernest or Raymond Charles Barker wrote this, but it said, with my keen knowledge of the Spirit, I face only pathways of pleasant success and certain abundance. And I thought, how 50s American. I don't know about you, but if that was my existence, where nothing ever happens, it wouldn't be long before I was singing another Talking Heads song like Psycho Killer or Burning Down the House. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, people wish to be settled, but only so far as they are unsettled is there hope for them. Only so far as we're unsettled is there hope. So this idea of things never changing goes against the whole flow of reality, of capital R reality, because have you noticed change is the only constant in the universe? You know? And so change is the evolution of spirit, always moving forward, always expressing more of itself in form. It's our inability to accept that flow, our desire and expectation that nothing will ever happen, that leads us to the experience of being caught up in the unpleasant aspect of grief. And there's a grief that is appropriate, and then there's a grief of getting stuck, yes? Okay? And so that's what sticks us. And so it stems from the desire to hold on to things as they are. I've worked with people who, doing memorial services for their grandparents who died at 103, 104 years old, and they go, I wasn't ready to lose them yet. And it's like, they're 103, it's like, how long were you planning to have that happen? We get caught up in our limited view of a universe that has a bigger picture, and we get caught up in our beliefs in not enough, and that certain people, things, or situations, circumstances, experiences are our source. So when these things change, and they always will, have you noticed? You're not the same person you were yesterday, and tomorrow you'll be somebody different, even if it's just a tiny little bit. In fact, you're not the same person that you were when you walked into this room. You're not the same person that you were 10 seconds ago. Okay? When these things change, we feel cut off from what we believed those people, things, and circumstances meant. Who assigns the meaning? We do. We forget or don't know that health, love, abundant good, joy, peace, creativity, and all of that is eternally available, though always in new clothing. Always in new clothing. And this is not to make our feelings of grief wrong or invalid, because both joy and grief come from the heart. Both joy and grief come from the heart. It's all divine. It's all the oneness. Grief is just love with a bad rap, as a friend of mine used to say. Leonard Jacobson, in his book, Embracing the Present, says, if you really allow yourself to feel the hurt or the sadness, the very worst that can happen is that you will cry. Let the tears flow. Welcome them. It won't be long before the tears turn to laughter and the pain reveals the joy hidden within it. If you observe children who haven't had decades of conditioning like we have, when they're in the midst of play, they get hurt, they cry, and then 5 minutes later, the weather has changed, and they're back, to playing or doing whatever they want, and it moves through. Our feelings biologically last for 90 seconds. That's about the time it takes to cycle a feeling through our body. Unless, of course, we keep re-triggering the feeling for ourselves. And then we can have it last a lifetime. It is not only okay, it's good and healthy to feel grief. And without feeling grief, we can't feel joy or love. We don't want to be so spiritual or so detached that we feel nothing. We call that spiritual bypass. Oh, it's all the divine plan. Everything is good. It's all working out for the best. On a spiritual level, yes, that's true. But have you noticed you got a body? Nudge the person next to you. Just notice they have a body, you have a body, you'll feel it, you'll experience it. We're here to experience the humanity as the divinity, and the divinity as the humanity. We're here to be both. We can get stuck in grief, and when we do, the way out is to understand the nature of grief, to understand the nature of holding on to the past, resisting change, thinking our source of love or good is gone, instead of just a channel through which that love or good has flowed. And that's what underlies the attachment, the stuckness in grief. And when we enjoy something, whether it's a momentary pleasure or a long-term relationship or an expectation, we feel emotion when it shifts or ends, yes? Okay. We're not here to be robots without feelings. We can simultaneously recognize the flow of life while still feeling sad about the things that change, the endings that change brings. Ernest Holmes reminded us that there is an action of consciousness as law upon substance, forever producing form and forever withdrawing from any particular form, thus producing another new form. The form changes, but the formless never. So we're always in this infinite love, infinite joy, infinite good, infinite sense of spirit, but the way that it shows up changes constantly. The Hindus refer to that as life and death, as we take on and put off new suits of clothes. But there is an essence of us, call it our soul, call it the Hindu word is Atman, whatever we want to call it, that doesn't change. But the way it shows up changes. How many of you would want to have only one suit of clothes that you get to wear every day, all day, for the rest of your life? That never changes, never... Lynn. If we love a particular form, we can feel sad when it changes. And again, the practice is to feel, yet not be so swallowed up in the feelings that we get stuck. To not let them turn into feeling victimized, angry, betrayed, or abandoned by life, and not wallowing in them forever. As a friend of mine says, if you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, don't set up a 4-star resort hotel there. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. When we lose someone or something, it's not the person or things left behind, but the relationships and the meanings. The meanings that we have created about those relationships that sparks those feelings. And understanding this and identifying the nature of those relationships, what is it that I value about them, is the key to looking at what do we value in life? And maybe what did we forget to value in life? And recognize that those same values are available through other channels in our lives. The values are eternally available. The how we interact with them and how they show up changes. And that's not saying rush out and go get a new mate if you lose your spouse. It's not saying rush out and get a new pet if your particular pet dies or whatever. It's a case of being aware of what you valued in that relationship as a light shining upon our own values. As we become more aware of what we value, we will naturally be drawn to ways to express and experience those values. And sometimes it takes that ending, that change, that shift, that waking up before we're aware of what is it that I value. Thomas Moore, in his book Care of the Soul, says care of the soul requires our appreciation of all the ways it presents itself. All the ways that the soul presents itself. Both our losses and our gains, our grief and our joy, our light and our dark, help us to understand and appreciate who we are and to live more authentically in alignment with our true values, with our true self. I've done many memorial services, and there are times when I listen to people talk in their eulogies and their sharing about the person who has passed away, that it helps me to be aware, oh, I need to be more aware of that in my life. I need to look for that. I want to bring some of the qualities that they described about that person into my life. And it takes that shift sometimes to wake us up. We can ask ourselves as we're feeling these feelings, what is this feeling doing here? What role does it have to play in my awakening? Instead of going, oh, I just don't want to feel that. It's no, what's the role it has to play in my awakening? Because whether you know it or not, we're all awakening. Yes? Okay. Even if we're not conscious, take the most unconscious person you can think of in the world, and even they are awakening. As Reverend Michael Beckwith said, we're all asleep. Some of us are in deep sleep, banging into things, and others of us are in light sleep, becoming more aware. As we become more aware, we become aware that we're sleeping. Doesn't mean we have to be perfect, whatever perfect is. And often it takes the accompanying loss, the loss and the accompanying grief, to allow us to slow down, to wake up to what's really important in our lives. Because we can get going along. Anybody besides me, you just get going along in your life, and all of a sudden you forget. And then all of a sudden something happens that wakes you up to what's really important. So just as we can't see the stars in the bright sunlight, our darkness can reveal a whole new awareness and appreciation of the lights within our lives. Another aspect of grief is that often grief comes associated with anger. We have a little guy who's joining us here. I think that might be a little Schaefer. Thank you. Grief comes associated with anger. It's a natural and healthy part of grief. Take a breath. We can be angry with another person, one whom we perceive caused the loss. We can be angry with ourselves, moving into shame and blame and guilt. We can be angry with God or life itself. I've never done that, but I've heard that some people do. At least not this week. Anyway. Again, feel the feelings, but don't set up camp there. Practice forgiveness as it reveals its necessity. Leonardo Boff says, in forgiveness, we transcend ourselves. We transcend our small selves. So that the past does not have the last word and cannot close off the present and the future. So that the past doesn't have the last word and can't close off the door to the present and the future. Forgiveness is not condoning another's behavior. It isn't saying you agree with what happened or that it's even okay. It's simply the remembrance that as a divine being, you are greater than any circumstance. Feel that. As a divine being, nudge your neighbor, just remind them you're a divine being. You are greater than any circumstance. So forgiveness is a gift we give to ourselves. It has nothing to do with the other person. It's a gift we give to ourselves. It's a gift of freedom. It's a gift of self-care. When working with people around forgiveness, I encourage them to find the place where they've made a judgment or a condemnation of a person or an event, where they've judged and condemned. And oftentimes the person they've condemned is ourselves. By condemning, we cut off, we short-circuit the path of learning and of awakening. By condemning, we say, oh, that's not God. And yet we say and we teach that it's all God. So therefore, how can I see it differently? It's much safer for the ego to just judge and move on, to label that person, that experience, bad. File it away in the mental file. There's that bad person. There's that bad experience. And operate from that and move on. But it leaves us both imprisoned in the past, closed off to the present moment of infinite love, which is always here, and unable to learn and grow from the experience because we just labeled it, put it in a file, and there it is. And we don't take it out and look at it. We don't examine it. What can I learn here? So as we face the unpleasantness, maybe holding our spiritual noses to avoid the bad smell of the unpleasant circumstance, we remember that a bad day for the ego is a good day for the soul, so that we may grow, remembering that the ego wants comfort, safety, and sameness, our description of heaven. Instead, we can bring compassionate curiosity. This is not beating ourselves up. This is compassionate curiosity. And ask, what can I learn from this? What is my soul communicating? What is my heart craving here? What is it that I value? What wants to be expressed? And so we can become aware of and connected with the natural joy that is eternally present. Years ago, I was going through a relationship breakup. I know that will surprise some of you. I have many of those experiences in my life. And I was going through a particularly difficult one. I remember I was on the way home from having dinner with friends and a little workshop with friends. And all of a sudden I hear this literally voice laughing inside of me. If you've never had that, it's a really weird experience. And it's like, what is that about? And I heard this voice clearly say, if you knew how much good I had in store for you, you'd be laughing too. And I had this moment of realizing that I could experience this joy at the same time that I was feeling really in grief about this relationship breakup. We can walk with both of those together. People sometimes, when they're in grief, sit there and think, I can't have a happy moment. I can't be in joy for something. And that's BS. Belief system. Because we can do both, because both can coexist simultaneously. What we call our soul really isn't ours. You know, our ego, which is kind of centered in, I am the ultimate reality here, thinks it possesses a soul that it can care for or not, that it can treat it as a possession, where in reality, our ego belongs to our soul. We really are a soul with an ego as an aspect of its existence. We belong to our souls, and then our souls exist beyond our personal circumstances and conceptions. Let me say that again. Our souls exist beyond our circumstances and our conceptions. And our individual souls are aspects of what's been called the anima mundi, the world soul. Our soul is part of a collective soul, and the world soul then is part of a universal soul, the infinite soul. So although we experience separation and multiplicity at the individual level, we are truly one and truly interconnected in a unity at the soul level, at the divine level, which opens us to the freeing experience that we can carry both grief and joy together, because our soul is always living in that divine nature of love, of beauty, of peace, of power, of joy. Even as our unique individual self, which is also divine. It's not that the ego isn't divine, it is, because otherwise it wouldn't be, right? There wouldn't be a you and me if it wasn't a divine idea in the mind of this infinite intelligence. But we live simultaneously in both worlds, in both aspects. We can carry both grief and joy together. Both help our souls develop. Both help our souls develop. Joy is a natural state. And so this week we have 3 spiritual practices. Denny tells me that he's got them in bullet form up there so we can take a look at them. The first one is notice where you experience grief. Notice where in your life you experience grief. Is this grief about the present or something past? And simply accept it without trying to fix it or heal it. Just, oh, I'm experiencing grief about this. Second, ask what that grief is here to show you. What can I learn about my soul self from this experience? And then third, notice if there's any forgiveness that's being called forth. And are you willing to free yourself from the enslavement of past hurts? And I have a tip for you about that. Unless you have a time machine, you cannot change the past. It is exactly as it was. How you feel about it is your choice, and you can change that. Before I close, I want to point out that, and it's going to be in the announcements, that in 2 weeks from yesterday, I'm starting a 12-week circle process for integrating the experience of grief into our lives. And you can see Marlisa right there to sign up for it. It's done on a love offering basis. It says $25 currently on the website, but it's really a love offering basis. And it's limited to 10 people, and we're going to be meeting here on Saturday mornings. First for 6 weeks, we'll take a break through August, then we'll do another 6 weeks. So if that's something that calls for you, I invite you to listen to your soul and get yourself free from places where you've been stuck in grief. I'm going to close with another quote from Thomas Moore from Care of the Soul. He says, "Care of the soul is not a project of self-improvement, nor a way of being released from the troubles and pains of human existence." Doggone, right? It's not that. It is not at all concerned with living properly or with emotional health. These are concerns of the temporal, heroic, Promethean life. In other words, our small minds. Care of the soul touches another dimension in no way separate from life, but not identical either with the problem solving that occupies so much of our consciousness. Our soul is not about problem solving. We care for the soul solely by honoring its expressions, by giving it time and opportunity to reveal itself, and by living life in a way that fosters the depth, interiority, and quality in which it flourishes. Soul is its own purpose and its own end. I invite you into a deeper relationship with your soul. We have an affirmation. Say this with me. I now release all that no longer serves me, and I embrace grief and joy. Let's say it one more time. I now release all that no longer serves me, and I embrace grief and joy. And so it is. We have a lovely song about listening to the soul. Take a look around at the faces of the divine. I'm grateful that we have some newer folks here. Welcome. Some folks we haven't seen in a long time. Welcome. Some folks who have traveled all the way from Asheville, North Carolina. Welcome back. A folk who has traveled all the way from Florida to be back with us. Hi, Jen. And each of you who's a divine expression. And thank you for being here. Moving into our hearts, we simply remember that there is this one infinite presence of love, of life, of joy. That no matter the circumstances, we feel the grief, we feel the love, we feel all the feelings because they're all divine. And yet we remember that underlying it all, we stand on this infinite presence that is love, that is joy, that is peace. It is good, we are good. So it is. We have a closing song.